on this episode of Postcards.
I think he was trying to live his values. He's really trying to take in tons of ideas, and what better place to do that than in a schoolhouse in Madison, Minnesota.
There have been multiple shows here where there's 3, or I think we've even had 4 generations of families on stage at the same time.
This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts, offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflections Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota. Explore hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for a great vacation or a place to hold an event. ExploreAlex.com. Tri-State Brain and Spine Institute, with locations in Alexandria, Edina, Crookston, and Maple Grove. Doctors dedicated to evaluating and treating all types of brain and spine problems, no matter how complex.
I am Noah Bly, and I am Robert Bly and Carol Bly's 3rd child. This video is about Robert Bly in Lac qui Parle County. And so I think I've been asked to just give a little introduction, and I think the most important thing to know in Lac qui Parle County is that Robert Bly was a terrible farmer. He was a terrible farmer from the beginning. So his father, my grandfather, Jacob Bly, was a great farmer. And he and his family, they gathered up more farmland and did a great job. And as my uncle, James, and my father, Robert, were brought up to be farmers, they would participate in all aspects of it. And clearly, though, my father had different trajectory.
Robert Bly is a pretty amazing writer and poet who grew up in Lac qui Parle County as a farm boy and developed into a highly imaginative, groundbreaking poet, writer, activist, leader of a men's movement, and is known all over the world, and certainly all over this country. His work often refers to everyday things and nature and the world around him right here in Lac qui Parle, but it's imbued with a lot of different layers of meaning and a depth that's quite powerful.
His clothes and the music. He would sometimes play a dulcimer or some kind of a auto harp or something and try and do music with the poetry, which works well for the poetry.
The wind one brilliant day called to my soul with an odor of jasmine. And the wind said, in return for the odor of my jasmine, I'd like all the odor of your roses.
I'm surprised that he's become a celebrity. I would never have expected that. And I did not think that he had anything outstanding about him. But you know, the best thing I can say about Bly, at one time, he was just an ordinary kid. But the best thing I can say about Bly is one time he had said something about how he had read that somewhere in the Bible maybe, or some religious saying that your Creator has given you talents. And when the time comes when you die and you meet your Creator, He's going to ask, what have you done with all the talents I gave you? And Bly has lived to the full and rewarding by giving back the talents that he was given. When I knew him, his name was Bob. He came in a freshman in high school, and he was trying to be the best boy ever, and he was always well-dressed, and he and his brother came to high school as freshmen. And we didn't know him because he would have been to country school, and the country kids would come in, and it was an uphill struggle for people to get together. But he and his brother came in as very privileged kids, we thought, because his dad had bought them a car, freshmen in high school.
He was full, I thought of him as being full of fun in high school. He also played in the band, by the way. He was involved with every organization there was. But as he grew older, he has grown so much more serious about life itself.
Robert was a young person who had a very strong inner life, which didn't relate necessarily to the surroundings that he was in. That's not to say that there aren't people out in western Minnesota who are like that. There are others. He happened to have a considerable amount of talent that helped him express himself in that way. And I think that, especially in his early poetry, but in later poetry too, the impact of being in the countryside and nature and interacting with the fields and the forests around you becomes part of your inner life, and you take those images and that are external, that others might not even see in the same way, and they affected him in that way.
I can't imagine him, how he changed, and he became protesting against the war. He was not establishment later on, but at the time he was very much establishment.
In this war, for the first time, that we've had this disgusting business of counting up every little small Vietnamese body we can find, and counting the heads and arms and adding them up.
The pictures I've seen when he was at Harvard, it was all black and of course he's lean and mean and tough looking and very dark. But then he starts to get into almost hippie looking clothes and very colorful stuff.
Everywhere we go, someone introduced Robert Bly, the poet Robert Bly, and he would read poems, and I would sort of be there and maybe suggest, read the Seal poem, Daddy. That was my favorite poem, which actually is my kid's favorite poem too. But when we got back to Madison in Lac qui Parle County, he was Bob Bly. Bob, how you doing?
The move back to Madison takes Bly out of the New York East Coast desire to be successful to an acceptance of what he is and what his place is.
Carol and Bob lived out in the country. We'd go out there for dinner, and he became more interesting then. And then he became quite a bit different than he was in high school. He and my brother, they enjoyed having plays and acting up. I think in a small town in this area, I would think that this is quite a conservative place out here, in my way of thinking. And my brother and Bob were not conservative. They were pretty colorful.
Robert Bly was a man in his own world, in an artistic world. And the majority of this community is not in the artistic world. They are in an agricultural, old, pioneer, monthly survival world. And so because of that, I think is why we just can't, when I say we, I mean the others that don't care for him and his poetry. And so I think because of that it's two different cultural worlds. We just don't see it. It just does not grab me.
Everybody knew him, so that's Robert. It's just, that's who he was. And so everybody was, I mean, Madison is a very, very kind town. Everybody is very kind. But he wasn't he just was different. And, you know, I don't think anybody was cruel or judgmental. It was just, that's Robert. He'd always been like that.
In fact, it was Bob's wife, Carol, that stimulated us to develop the Prairie Art Center by the old Lutheran church and have a place just for entertainments, and that was wonderful. They first of all had a play out in their barn. It was really fun. And after that, and they heard the appreciation, you know, how much people enjoyed it and that, they said, we've got to have some center in Madison where people can have this.
Their love for theater and literary work and how it really should impact people's everyday lives. And they made that kind of come to life with the help of the community here, and now the community carries it forward. That's cool. That's great.
There's bookcases where the books were, and also other strange objects. So he would look for objects to be inspired by, and that might be an old stump, that might be the snow in the field, or it might be a crow that he found dead on the side of the road.
But there was times when he was very, very serious. When us kids would, you know, we weren't to go to the study. We weren't allowed to go hang out by the study when he was working. But what you tell kids not to do something, so we'd sneak up and peek in the windows, and he would come out and go, "Wah!" You know, do his scary voice, and we'd all go running and screaming, and we learned not to do that anymore.
One of the things where Bly was fortunate was in the 70s and 80s, people got interested in feeling poetry and also in nature.
I was always fascinated by, I mean, it never occurred to me that you'd sit on the end of a pickup and watch the wind or watch the storm or things like that, and then be writing about how it touches you in certain ways. I had never heard of anybody doing that until he did.
The other thing that I think is just generally critiquing the system. And Robert Bly says, how strange to think of giving up all ambition, you know? I see with such clear eyes. So for my generation, you know, don't try to be a success. Don't try to do what the system tells you to do.
Well, my mother, Mariana Manfred, was married to my father, Frederick Manfred, the Minnesota writer. She was also a writer. And she used to say he's our Norwegian uncle, because that's how it felt to be around Robert. It didn't feel like some literary person arriving to talk to my father, Frederick. They were both very down-to-earth people, men, and actually didn't talk about literature all that much.
His poetry is filled with images from the land and from farming, but so is his writing. That's pretty cool, that he didn't just make his farm kind of a retreat for himself, but rather he offered back to the community his love, and I think Carol Bly too, together.
You know, that's what legacy is, and he is leaving an amazing gift for everyone that'll outlast him for generations to come. I'm very proud to be related to someone with that gift of a legacy.
In late September, many voices tell you, you will die. That leaf says it, that coolness, all of them are right. There are many souls. What can they do about it? Nothing. They're already part of the invisible. Our souls have been longing to go home anyway. Come on, they say. Slade, lock the door, let's go. Our souls have been longing to go home anyway. Come on, they say. Lock the door. Slade, let's go.
But the body doesn't agree. The body says, we buried a little iron ball under that tree. Let's go get it.
I feel like Robert Bly was a person who lived his imagination to the fullest. He was brave enough to bring out into the open, in his writing and in his life, all the kinds of wild and creative ideas that he had. He might have kept a few inside, but it certainly seems that he was courageous. He went into the dark and brought it out. He spoke about his own self, and he invoked the imagination of the world and the dream world, and he brought it right out into the open.
I think he was trying to live his values. He's really trying to take in tons of ideas, and what better place to do that than in a schoolhouse in Madison, Minnesota.
It's hard to grasp how much generosity is involved in letting us go on breathing when we contribute nothing valuable but our grief. Each of us deserves to be forgiven, if only for our persistence in keeping our small boat afloat when so many have gone down in the storm.
You know you can watch postcards on your TV, but did you also know you can watch postcards and other Pioneer shows anywhere, anytime using Pioneer On Demand at video.pioneer.org.
What is the Prairie Arts Center? To me, it is the opportunity for all of the multi-talented people in a rural community to display and show their talents to the rest of the community in and around Madison.
The Prairie Arts Center is a community theater located in Madison, Minnesota, right next to the courthouse. It is, the building is an old Lutheran church that was sold to the city and repurposed, and a group of community theater enthusiasts got together and just started kind of transforming the building over a lot of years into what we have today, which is a very intimate space with up-to-date lighting and sound and a great stage space that people generally love to work in. I became involved at the Prairie Arts Center in 1999, and since that time I have gotten to wear a lot of hats. I started out bringing my needle, because I am a seamstress, and helping to repair and finish costumes, watch children when they're downstairs, they need someone to supervise them. I was involved in my first Country Christmas in 1999, and I thought it was such a cool thing for a small community to be doing that I asked a board member how I could get involved. And that board member, Dick Hauk, everybody knows Dick Hauk in town, and he said, well, we'll put you on the board and you can get involved and see what you can do.
Oh, Rosemary, yes. Rosemary Hendrickson, she a great gal. And for many years, in fact, I think it was probably 18 years that we put on a Country Christmas in Madison in December. And our last production was in 2013, but she was instrumental in putting together a lot of these shows over the years, and still is on the board and an active member.
I've probably been going to shows here since a really long time ago, since I was very little. My grandma would always take us here to see the shows. And the ones that stick in my head the most are the Christmas shows that they do, the Country Christmases. And I had been a part of those since 1997. There's a picture in the back hanging up of little me back 19 years ago, a part of that Christmas show.
say involvement in community theater has shaped us as human beings. I see community theater as a truly human endeavor where people have to really connect with one another and learn to trust each other and work together to get to the end of a production.
Kids getting together with adults, for instance, I think this promotes a sense of community, and they can learn a lot about themselves when they're up there on the stage and trying to learn lines and just overall sense of being included in something that's bigger than themselves. With all the productions that I've been in, I think it made me grow as a person. Very importantly, you have to work with people that you haven't met before, so you have to learn to get along and produce something together.
I think the Prairie Arts Center is a cherished establishment in Madison that really keeps the arts going. It makes the arts accessible to people who it normally wouldn't be, or people who used to be involved in the arts in some form or another and still want to do performing.
Well, I think it's a unique situation in Madison. Our city has supported us in all that we do.
I think the Prairie Arts Center is especially unique because it's a funny old building with a lot of character. It has sustained a core group of patrons and supporters who've really grown with it and stayed with it. It really is a labor of love by a lot of people.
Something else that's really cool about the Prairie Arts Center and the community that it forms, there have been multiple shows here where there's 3, or I think we've even had 4 generations of families on stage at the same time. For me personally, I've had my grandma and my mom and my brothers. So a lot of times we'll have your real family and then you'll have your performance family here, and you get to put on these great shows with all of them together, and it's a really special feeling.
My absolute favorite memory of involvement at the Prairie Arts Center would have to be my involvement with the Summer Shakespeare for Young People project that we did. We did 4 of those shows with Carmen Fernholz, and I would direct the kids, and I would do the costuming, and it was just every time we did Much Ado About Nothing. The first year we were going to do that, Carmen didn't believe that we had time or the kids would want to memorize a real Shakespeare play, so he got a young people's edition, and during the read-through, we threw it out. And that night we had 1 copy of the real Shakespeare play, Much Ado About Nothing, and they did the real Shakespeare play, and really well done, really well done. And it was an immense experience. I just can't say how much I enjoyed watching those kids grow into the language of Shakespeare, to really get those classic characters, and just a really special group of young people. And when they went out to the high school, hands down, those kids who were involved in Summer Shakespeare, they were great theater kids. And they all went on to become great human beings, I believe.
I think a couple of my favorite productions here at the Prairie Arts Center would be Romeo and Juliet, and I played Romeo in that production, and that was kind of a first taste of Shakespeare for me as a high school student. Being Romeo, you know, you have all of these lines to memorize. It's a lot of lines. That in itself was very, very gratifying to get done with the show, and you're like, I said all of those lines, like, holy cow, that was really a lot of lines. And to understand what you're saying, too, when you get into Shakespeare, it's a completely different language.
Thinking back on all the plays I've done, probably only over 50 or so, my favorite was probably I Do, I Do. it was Mary Melby and myself, and we're the only two characters. So we had to learn a lot of lines, learn a lot of music, and coordinate everything, and I think that's probably the best production that I was involved in.
In the future, I would like to see the Prairie Arts Center keep going. I would like to see community theater continue to thrive in the Madison area. I would hope that young people, as people like me and some of us who've been so instrumental in driving the organization for so many years, as we kind of wear out or our health begins to fail, that there would be somebody else who'd pick up the stick and keep going to the next lap, because it's there's really nothing else quite like it. A sporting event doesn't touch the heart the same way that community theater can. It's a powerful medium. It's a powerful way to grow, totally. And I just hope that it continues.
What I would like to really end with is saying that how much I, as a director, appreciate the broad-based support for the Prairie Arts Center. So to have a community supporting what I love to do, it doesn't get much better than that.
Have an idea for postcards? Send your story suggestions to postcards@pioneer.org. Visit pioneer.org/postcards to catch up on missed episodes and to find out more about your favorite segments. This program on Pioneer Public Television is funded by the Minnesota Arts and Cultural Heritage Fund with money from the vote of the people of Minnesota on November 4th, 2008. Additional support provided by Mark and Margaret Yakel-Julien in honor of Shalom Hill Farm, a nonprofit rural education retreat center in a beautiful prairie setting near Windham in southwestern Minnesota. ShalomHillFarm.org. The Arrowwood Resort and Conference Center, your ideal choice for Minnesota resorts, offering luxury townhomes, 18 holes of golf, Darling Reflections Spa, Big Splash Water Park, and much more. Alexandria, Minnesota. Explore hundreds of lakes, trails, and attractions for a great vacation or a place to hold an event. ExploreAlex.com. Tri-State Brain and Spine Institute, with locations in Alexandria, Edina, Crookston, and Maple Grove. Doctors dedicated to evaluating and treating all types of brain and spine problems, no matter how complex.